Welcome to Western Australia. In this video, we want to introduce you to some interesting facts and figures about our amazing home state. Let's start with the capital city of Perth. Perth is closer to Jakarta in Indonesia, 3,010 kilometres away, than it is to Australia's capital city, Canberra, at 3,716 kilometres. You'll often hear people quoting that Singapore is closer than Canberra, but those people have not bothered to check this with Google, which says that Singapore is 3,912 kilometres away, while Canberra is almost 200 kilometres closer. The closest capital city to Perth is Adelaide, 2,692 kilometres away. Perth was once known as the City of Light. This dates back to the NASA space program in the 1960s. John Glenn, passing high above in space, remarked in 1962 that he could see the lights of Perth. They had all been left on overnight to help the astronauts see the city, and the remoteness of the city, with nothing else nearby, made it stand out all the more. These days, of course, most cities have grown so large that many are easily visible from space. The story almost nobody tells is that 36 years later, John Glenn was once again in space, and once again he was due to pass over Perth at night. Again, the city put all its lights on for this historic moment. But as the spacecraft approached the West Australian coast, it seemed as though most of the state was shrouded by cloud cover. At the last minute, the lights of Perth appeared, and it was the only spot for hundreds of kilometres that was free from cloud. John commented that Perth had certainly grown bigger since he first passed high overhead. There is a link in the description below to a video about this mostly forgotten event. The population of Perth is around 2.1 million people, while the state only has 2.5 million. That makes for some pretty sparsely populated areas outside of Perth. According to those who measure these things, Perth experiences an average of 8 hours sunshine a day, although it certainly doesn't feel much like it in the middle of winter. There are at least 8 other Perths around the world, located in Scotland, 2 in the USA, 2 in Canada, South Africa, Guyana, and even 1 in Tasmania. Western Australia, at 2,527,013 square kilometres, is the second largest state in the world, and is only eclipsed by the Russian Republic of Sakha. If WA was a country in its own right, it would be the 10th largest in the world. Western Australia accounts for about 30% of Australia's landmass, but only 11% of the country's population. Western Australia certainly has a lot of sand, and as a result, Western Australians are commonly called sand gropers. Oddly enough, there's also an insect called a sand groper that spends its life underground, burrowing through that sand. There is a lot of coastline to explore in WA, and when I say a lot, I mean 12,889 kilometres. There are wide expanses of white pristine beach, as well as towering cliffs and rocky headlands. In the south, you'll find large smooth granite rocks sloping gently into clear blue water, while in the north, you'll find red sandstone blocks soaring straight up from azure waters. It's entirely possible that WA has the most beautiful and diverse coastline of anywhere in the world. Australia's whitest beaches are found in the Esperance area, on the south coast, and this has been scientifically proven twice. WA also has a number of pink lakes. While the lakes are not always pink, at certain times of the year, the algae that causes the colour change makes them turn bright pink, and it's a very popular attraction with photographers. They can be found from Esperance all the way north to Port Gregory, north of Geraldton. Western Australia exports camels to the Middle East because we have the largest number of purebred camels in the world. The camels were first used to transport goods through the outback, but as road transport and trains took over, they were released into the bush, where they have continued to thrive. Most people have heard of Uluru, or Ayers Rock as it used to be known, but how many people have heard of Mount Augustus? Probably not that many outside Western Australia. So what's its claim to fame? Well, according to some sources, it's the largest rock formation in the world. At 8 kilometres long and 3 kilometres wide, it's certainly impressive. Unlike Uluru, which is a monolith, Mount Augustus is a monocline, and since I only have limited time to explain things on this video, you'll have to Google that to see what the differences really are. It's estimated that only 1/3 of Mount Augustus protrudes above the Earth's surface. In 1932, the Australian government declared war on, wait for it, emus. Yes, these big flightless birds had become public enemy number one. The army was called in, and the 7th Heavy Artillery, who were on this occasion armed with Lewis machine guns, went out to wage war on the hapless birds. The first operation in October 1932 was not, however, spectacularly successful, with over 2,500 rounds of ammunition being expended, while only about 50 of the birds were accounted for. There are reports of a higher kill rate, but we tend to think this was just to make the army look not quite so bad. The second operation was mounted in November 1932. It was somewhat more successful, with a reported 986 birds killed, with 9,860 rounds of ammunition. Those figures are just a little bit suspicious, considering the symmetry of exactly 10 rounds per bird. Further requests were made by farmers for assistance in dealing with the hungry birds, but the army was not involved again. Instead, a bounty was placed on the birds, which was much more successful and resulted in 57,034 bounties being claimed in just 6 months of 1934. Despite these attempts to wipe them out, the crafty emus have survived and thrived in the outback, which I guess makes them the winners of the Emu War. Kings Park, that covers 400 hectares, is situated right next to the central business district of Perth. It is the world's largest urban park. Busselton Jetty, at 1,841 metres, is the longest timber pile jetty in the Southern Hemisphere. The Perth Mint, established in 1899, is the oldest operating mint using its original buildings in the world. At 260 kilometres long, Ningaloo, located along the edge of the Northwest Cape, is the longest fringing reef in the world. There are some facts about WA that you will find out there on the internet that are no longer true. These include WA having the largest number of self-made millionaires. Since this was true, many have gone broke or wound up in prison. Also, that WA is home to the independent nation of Hutt River. Sadly, the Principality of Hutt River no longer exists.